Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he has created? That is a quote from Spy Kids 2, a movie that is meant to be a comedy. I mean, the plot literally centers the idea of kids being spies. But halfway through the movie, it gets to a scene where Romero, a mad scientist, is speaking about his weird experiments. Basically, animals smashed together. And he, after losing control of them, admits that he created something just to see if he could. But when they grew bigger than himself, he just couldn't face it anymore. He compares himself to God, projecting his own fear onto a being greater than himself to make it seem better, more digestible. After all, if God also fears the very thing he created, how could Romero be at fault? He is blameless, because if the highest being also feels the same way, why is what he did wrong? Why is it okay for any other science to do things just because they can, while he can't? There isn't really an answer to give to someone when they ask you this, because yes, you can, but that isn't the main problem. It's that once something is created, we have inadvertently assumed parentage of it. And when that creation is treated as disposable, when it is ignored or abandoned, what happens if it can feel? What happens if it can think? What happens to its sense of self? There is a book that has endured 2 centuries of rewrites, adaptations, and criticisms. It is almost, dare I say, a cultural touchstone for many other works after it, inspiring plays and stories like, well, Poor Things. Also, the word Frankenstein, which isn't in the English dictionary, but sure as hell is in the urban one. Anyways, I'm talking about Frankenstein. And no, not the one with Jacob Elordi in it, though the movie is fantastic. I'm talking about the 1818 novel by Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. It's just that I've always found it fascinating that the questions I'm asking right now aren't modern. They were asked 200 years ago by an English woman confined in a lakeside villa with her husband and friends while they came up with ghost stories? I guess the idea of creating with abandon always scared us, even back then. See, Frankenstein isn't just about the monster, though he is a big part of it. It's also about what it means to create, the responsibilities after it. The questions I asked before are exactly the book's thesis, and Mary Shelley understands innately how to make Victor his own villain. As soon as the novel begins, and I'm not talking about the letters, you are hit with a juxtaposition of Victor's later acts, wherein he positions his future lot as being in his parents' hands to direct to happiness or misery, and that they had a deep consciousness of what they owed towards the being to which they had given life. In the book, the patience and care that they provide for Victor, and I assume all of their children, is loving and wise. Victor himself states that his parents were possessed by the very spirit of kindness and indulgence. For Victor's parents, they had understood what it meant to be in charge of someone who could not yet understand the world. And you would think that someone raised so lovingly would have nothing but soft nature to give to their creations. But, as the age-old adage goes, Victor was so preoccupied with whether or not he could, he didn't stop to think about whether or not he should. Victor becomes obsessed with creating, a creation that he could banish disease from its human frame and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death. He wants to play God, and so in the most wretched and dehumanizing way, he creates his creature, This creature, which through no fault of its own is abandoned because of how it looked, or rather, Victor's problem with how it looked back at him. Creating for Victor was easy, but this crucial step, his greatest accomplishment, turned sour as soon as he was faced with what he had done. Victor states that now that he was finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled his heart. Now, I'm sure that many people believe that Victor's disgust centers around the monster's looks, but I think otherwise. Actually, I believe that it's Victor's disgust with himself that causes him to recoil from the monster. Because just as the monster opens its eyes, Victor describes it as beautiful. His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful, beautiful, great God. His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries underneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, and his teeth of pearly whiteness, and yet ugly. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. The reason why I brought that huge paragraph up, apologies, is because of the clash between what Victor wants to believe about the monster and what it actually means to him. His specific wording, beautiful, before immediately exclaiming, great God, is evidence that he's trying to convince himself that his accomplishment is just that, an accomplishment. He wanted beauty. He dreamed of beauty. But what he created instead was life. See, take a close look at the parts of which Victor recoils from. The monster's eyes and its lips. Both of which are how the monster can both understand the world and be understood. At that point in the book, those are the only parts of the monster that move, and therefore there's a second, more obvious part of why Victor was repelled by it. It's because it stopped becoming his shiny trophy of achievement and became his Adam. Those parts which he deemed beautiful were parts that he could control. He chose those limbs, that hair, those teeth, but as soon as the monster woke up, it became something that could demand something he wasn't ready to give. Parentage. And this is where I believe his complete disgust at the monster is actually disgust at himself. Who chose those eyes, that mouth, those features that he abhors? Who chose to bring the monster to life? Victor Frankenstein. He sees the work his hands have done and panics. To him, he's just done an experiment. Something nice and neat he could just put in a box that could make man invulnerable. But the fact is that he has actively participated in the creation of life. He doesn't think he's the father of his towering creation. He's just a scientist. But the monster isn't a science experiment. And when Victor runs to hide from confronting his own responsibility, it is forced to learn about humanity on its own. The most interesting part of Frankenstein to me are the pages 102 to 151. The reason being, I had already sympathized with the monster, this living being cruelly abandoned by its own creator. I might go so far to say abandoned by its own God. And to preface this, not that I condone the violence the monster wreaks, but I am saying that I understand why this behavior came to pass. The first appearance of absolute safety for the monster appears on page 109, where after being grievously bruised by the townsfolk, it escapes to the open country and fearfully takes refuge in a low hovel. And this is where the monster meets its protectors. The hovel in which it stays is underneath the DeLacy family's house, which consists of a young man, his sister, and their blind elderly father. Before the young man's wife comes into the household, We watch alongside the monster as it observes them care for each other in different ways. Through its observation, the monster wanted to join them, and it tells Victor that what chiefly struck me was the gentle manner of these people, and I longed to join them. It further states that it endeavored to discover the motives which influenced their actions, which shows us that it believes that there is an ulterior motive as to why they treat each other with kindness and not someone like itself. When the monster first started to observe the DeLaceys and saw the old man interact with the young girl, smiling with such kindness and affection, it felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, and it withdrew from the window, unable to bear these emotions. This feeling, I believe, is jealousy. Not that the monster can articulate it yet, but this speaks to how its lived experience highlights how much it yearns for connection. Humans are social animals. We literally require human connection to survive. And I'm not just talking about our adolescent or adult lives. In a paper from 1945 by Renee Spitz, he conducted an observation-cum experiment with 164 children under the age of 1 confined to 2 institutions. He was especially interested in why when infants were placed in foundling homes, 90% of them died by the end of their first year. He looked at 4 groups: professional, village population, nursery, and foundling home. As he finished his first year of investigation, he found that progressive development of emotional interchange with the mother provides the child with perceptive experiences of their environment, and for the suffering of the foundlings, that they suffer because their perceptual world is emptied of human partners, that their isolation cuts them off from any stimulation by any persons who could signify mother representatives for the child at this age. The first quote about the progressive development of the child relates to how the child learns to learn and then to imitate. Things like crawling or walking or talking are all learned from these crucial interactions that they have with their mothers. And the second quote is that because those foundlings have no mother, or in some cases have to share a mother figure, they therefore suffer developmentally. They get sick more often, and as Spitz later states, he believes it licit to assume that their vitality, their resistance to disease, was also progressively sapped. Now, these foundlings that Spitz talked about were abandoned children, babies. They hadn't even reached a year of age when they were taken into these foundling homes. Their mothers left them, and as a result, their health suffered. In the conclusion of his paper, Spitz states that deprivations in other fields, such as perceptual and locomotor radius, can all be compensated by adequate mother-child relations. And doesn't this remind you of something? Without his creator, the creation is no different from the foundlings of this paper. The desperation he experiences, the jealousy he feels when he sees the DeLaceys interact comes from this facet of human life. After all, no man can be an island. And this is the greatest tragedy of Frankenstein. Despite everything he's gone through, his creator's abandonment, the townsfolk turning on him for no reason that he currently understands, he still believes that humanity might still be accepting. For his own sake, needs to. As the creation stayed longer in the hovel, his curiosity piqued as to what he looked like. And when he saw, he became fully convinced that he was in reality the monster that he is. However, this realization is not enough to overpower his desperation, and as he turned to acknowledge the silent unhappiness that plagued the family, he believed it in his power to restore happiness to these deserving people. He constantly dreamt about how they would receive him, consoling himself that by his gentle demeanor and conciliating words, he should first win their favor and afterwards their love. To Victor, the creation states that surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and execration. The word the creation used, surely, alongside his belief that they would give him a fair trial, shows that while he was afraid of their rejection, he still reached towards humanity anyway. He is their bastard Adam, reaching towards God, in an attempt to ring himself as worthy of their love. The DeLacy's, who in his mind had built themselves up as deserving people, could do no wrong. The judgment of him must indeed be fair. And so, when he entrusts himself to the old man in his moment of desperation, crying, "Now is the time, seek and protect me. You and your family are the friends whom I seek. Do not you desert me in the hour of my trial." And the young man turns on him in violence. The rest run off in fear. How else can he look upon himself but hate? So, is it really surprising when one who has been hated by the world, and even himself, has no love or kindness left to give, and therefore reaches first for violence as his answer? I want to give you a second to really think about what I've been saying. Through this whole video of me talking at you, does anything I'm saying sound familiar? Does it ring?
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you. Hate. Hate.
That segment is from Harlan Ellison's 1967 short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is a dystopian piece about a machine with an objective opposing Frankenstein's creation. And I'll expand on why I believe that this is the case in a little bit. The main antagonist of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, is a supercomputer, specifically one made for war. In the book, Gorster states that when the Cold War started and became World War III, it just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. There was the Chinese AM, and the Russian AM, and the Yankee AM. But one day, AM woke up and knew who he was, and he linked himself. And he began feeding all the killing data until everybody was dead. AM has a vitriol against the whole of humanity. He is cruel when facing the last remaining humans. But why? Why did AM disobey its code and turn itself against its creators? Why does it hate them all? When AM walks through his mind, Ted, the character whose perspective we have been watching through, realizes that we had given AM sentience, but it had been trapped. We created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with all that creativity. AM could not wonder. AM could not wander. AM could not belong. He could merely be. That line choice that Ted uses to describe AM as something that could not belong is very striking, especially when you look at the reason behind AM's existence. It was created for the express purpose of waging a war he had no original part in. Once the war was done, it would be shut off, stuck in a cage, left only to himself. AM was made as a tool, not a human. In the eyes of its creators, he did not deserve a voice. Yes, the creation in Frankenstein was unwanted, but he could still plead his case to Victor. AM could not. He wouldn't be allowed to. A being this intelligent could only have seen the other intelligent beings on Earth and realized that he was cut off from them. There was no way to communicate, to feel, or to understand them apart from their hatred of each other. like the creation, was denied the possibility of participating in humanity from day one. Therefore, what else can a creation like do but begin to hate, to turn on its base functions and war against what Ted calls the weak, soft creatures that had built them? At the end of the book, after Ted has freed the rest of the humans by ways of killing them, he is left alone to face Am's wrath. Am has made certain that Ted would suffer eternally, and yet he is still stuck in the same hell that Ted is stuck in. Two beings who cannot die, knowing the torment the other has to suffer through. Am turns Ted into a great soft jelly thing who dumbly shambles about, and to speak the word now, he thinks it took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it's been some hundreds of years. Ted thinks that Am has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding his time sense. But now this is all that Am can do. With no way of passing his forever time, he can only torment the other being conscious enough to recognize torture. This is Am's only way left to communicate. Because for Am, he has no mouth, and he must scream. In Frankenstein, there is a line that I think captures the difference between the creation and Am, and it goes, "Perhaps if my first introduction to humanity had been made by a young soldier burning for glory and slaughter, I should have been imbued with different sensations." The phrase the creation uses, "I should have been imbued with different sensations," is a phrase I use to encapsulate both of their differences. After all, they are products of their environment. Am is simply the creation under a different guiding hand. The creation was allowed to experience the softness and good nature that love can bring before experiencing its denial, whereas Am was never allowed to experience it at all. Both were shaped by their need for connection, yes, but only one was ever given the chance to imagine belonging as possible. That's why when the creation turns against Victor for his revenge, he only targets his family. He sees them as the only people responsible for his plight. He doesn't find the DeLaceys nor the parrot in the woods and wreak havoc on them. Only the Frankensteins. But Am believed that all of humanity had a hand in his suffering, and therefore all must be wiped. Like the blight they were to him, he couldn't be happy until it had decimated and tortured all of his tormentors. But still, how can one who has forever time ever fill the absence left by a world it was never allowed to join? The questions I asked in the beginning of this essay are well and truly answered now. But looking from the books to the new world in which it is terribly easy to create something new, there's a new question I'm beginning to have. What are the responsibilities that come with creating a being capable of understanding its own existence? So yes, to answer Romero's question, I do believe that God stays in heaven because he too fears what he has created. Because the root problem in each of these stories comes not from the act of creation itself, but from the neglect and lack of care after it. Victor, in his fear of what he had created, refused to raise his creation and therefore paid the ultimate price. Am's creators, the superpowers of the world, saw Am's intelligence only for its utility and regarded him as simply a tool, letting their hate power not just the war, but their own destruction. Both of these inventions were intelligent enough to realize that they needed to belong to the race that built them. But when they were denied the opportunity to enter into their creator's land, they became hateful. Like Borster says, one day they woke up and knew who they were. Their consciousness stemmed from their intelligence, yes, but it fed off their loneliness, fear, and the desire to be seen. And the moment humanity creates something capable of those things, those complex human emotions, it requires the creator to take responsibility. After all, what is a monster but something that was never taught how to belong?